The Widow's Lantern, The Secret War of Deborah Ganet. Act I, The Stitch and the Saber. The wind clawed through the trees of Middleborough, Massachusetts, bending their black silhouettes over the crooked lanes and stone fences like grieving widows. Deborah Ganet pulled her shawl tighter, her fingers stiff with cold and the ache of threadwork. The year was 1781. The war had been raging for 6 years, and though it had consumed cities and countrysides alike, Middleborough had remained a hushed corner, a town just out of reach of both ruin and glory. But that was about to change. Deborah had been orphaned, indentured, and hardened by labor. By 20, she had learned how to read the land, stitch wounds, shoe a horse, and lie convincingly when the truth posed danger. She lived quietly in the home of a reclusive widow, taking in mending and keeping the fire lit. But each morning, when the cockerel crowed, she would steal away to the barn with a musket stock, carved from a broom handle, and practice the drills she'd seen the local militia perform. She learned quickly. Too quickly. The townsfolk saw a plain girl, modest and reserved. But Deborah carried her brother's death in her marrow. He had died on a transport ship to Manhattan, belly full of fever, name lost to the tide. The army never wrote back. She wrote her own reply, with action. One rainy morning, Deborah stood before her mirror, flattening her chest and binding her frame. She had sewn a false inner lining into a pair of breeches, reinforced a pair of boots, and tucked a short sword into her cloak. Her hands didn't tremble. She had already said goodbye to the woman in the reflection. By candlelight, she inked a name onto a scrap of paper. Robert Shirtliff, her dead cousin's name. A ghost enlisted in the Continental Army. By the next full moon, she was gone from Middleborough. She passed through Dedham and Providence on foot, posing as a farm boy traveling west to help his uncle with the harvest. She slept in haylofts and barter houses, keeping her words short and her voice lower than it wanted to be. No one suspected. No one looked twice. Outside Worcester, she joined a column of ragged men lining up at a makeshift recruiting station. She was just another hungry soul with worn shoes and fire in her eyes. A grizzled sergeant nodded without looking up. Name? Shirtliff, she said. Robert Shirtliff, sir. The camp outside Worcester was a skeleton of an army. Blankets stitched with moss, muskets patched with twine. These were the remnants of New England's fury: carpenters, blacksmiths, farmers turned riflemen, most of them no older than she was. They laughed, fought, bled, and vanished in the night. Deborah drilled at dawn and volunteered for guard duty under the stars. Her knuckles split from musket drills, her ankles swelled from the boots, and her body screamed each time she climbed into a saddle. But she never faltered. A young private named Ellis took a liking to her, thought she was just shy, a farm boy not yet used to soldiering. She said little, smiled when needed, and studied everything. The layout of the camp, the chain of command, the routes of the messengers. That winter, while patrolling the edge of camp, she came across 2 figures in hushed conversation beneath a pine grove. Officers. And a third, cloaked in black, handed them a parchment sealed in wax. She ducked behind a snowbank, ears straining. The words were muffled by wind, but one phrase echoed clearly. The widow's lantern must be moved before the British change their course. Back in her tent, Deborah lay awake long into the night, staring at the canvas above her head. The widow's lantern. She didn't know what it was, or who it referred to. But something told her it wasn't a code name for a weapon or fort. It was a person. And perhaps, just perhaps, someone who operated in the same shadows Deborah had chosen. When the company received orders to march south toward Tarrytown, Deborah packed her fife, her musket, and the memory of that phrase. Her war, her real war, was just beginning. Act 2, The Spy in Scarlet. The march to Tarrytown was a slow, cold crawl. Slush clawed at their boots, wagons groaned with the weight of cannon shot and salted meat, and the men grumbled in rhythm with their footsteps. Deborah kept her eyes forward, head down, watching for more than just mud or frostbite. She had begun listening closely at night, during mess, while mending uniforms, while fetching water, and a name kept drifting through whispered ranks: Captain Rivington. No one said what he commanded or where he was posted. But his name came with a shadow. And every time Deborah heard it, someone muttered about the widow's lantern soon after. She filed it away like powder in a dry horn, silent until it mattered. Tarrytown was not yet a ruin, but it breathed heavy with suspicion. Redcoats had raided weeks earlier, and the town now lived under its own curfew. Doors locked early. Lanterns were trimmed low. Loyalists still lived among the rebels, neighbors now enemies, shopkeepers now informants. The Continental Army's arrival was met with a mixture of relief and dread. Deborah's unit was assigned to patrol the outer ridge, where Old Manners overlooked the Hudson River. Her watch overlapped with Private Ellis, still her most talkative companion. "You hear the one about Rivington?" he said one evening as they patrolled a hill crowned with leafless oaks. "They say he's not with the army. Not officially. Washington won't speak his name. Some say he's a shadow catcher." "What's that mean?" Deborah asked, voice low. "Means he finds things that don't want to be found. People too." He squinted toward the river, then leaned in. "They say he works with someone. A woman. Nobody's seen her face, only what she leaves behind." Deborah's heart slowed. "Leaves behind?" "A scarlet ribbon. Tied to a tree or doorpost. Always means the same thing: the British will be hit by morning." That night Deborah left camp under the pretense of scouting firewood. She carried her musket but wore no powder. Only a blade, hidden in her boot. She followed the ridge path along the Hudson. The wind carried the creak of ships down below, but inland all was hushed. After an hour's walk she saw it. A ribbon. Scarlet as blood. Tied to the gatepost of an abandoned farmhouse. Deborah crouched behind a stone wall and waited. Midnight came. Then movement, 3 riders, cloaked, descending the opposite trail. The lead rider dismounted and approached the gate. He didn't knock. Instead, he whistled, 2 short notes, then 1 long. The door opened. Inside, a candle flared. Deborah crawled forward, slipping through a broken side window. She pressed her back to the wall and listened. "We strike the convoy north of Dobbs Ferry," said a man's voice, clipped, British educated. "The widow has agreed to mark the path." Another voice, this one a woman's. "I will ride tonight. But I need assurance that Rivington will not compromise my contacts again." "You will have it." Deborah held her breath. The widow. She stepped back silently, but snapped a floorboard with her heel. Shouts. She ran, crashed through the brush, shot through the dark like a deer. Musket balls tore bark overhead. She dove down the riverbank, rolled, and hid beneath a fallen log. One rider galloped past, searching. Then silence. She stayed hidden till dawn. Back at camp, Deborah made her report to Sergeant Mallory. She lied, said she'd spotted riders by the river, loyalists possibly carrying messages. He nodded, half believing, then dismissed her. But her report reached further ears. That evening, while cleaning her musket, a man entered the tent uninvited. He was tall, angular, with a wool cloak and an officer's bearing. But no insignia. "You're Private Shirtliff?" "Yes," Deborah said, hand pausing mid-polish. "You were near the Hudson last night. Alone?" She nodded slowly. He stepped closer. "The woman you overheard is known as the widow. She's been aiding our cause for 2 years. And now, she's gone." Deborah said nothing. "You will help us find her," the man said. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "I'm the one who doesn't exist. Just like you." He placed a folded paper on the table and left. Inside, a map. With a red mark over Sleepy Hollow. And a scarlet ribbon. Act 3, The Hollow Watch. Sleepy Hollow wasn't on most military maps. It was too small, too tangled in superstition, and too close to contested ground. Nestled between crumbling Dutch farms and half-burned taverns, It straddled the thin line between loyalist shadow and rebel whisper. Deborah reached it just before dusk. She wore a stolen blue coat now, muddied and scorched. Her hair was tucked under a tricorn hat, her chest bound tight beneath linen. Every step into the town felt like walking deeper into a mouth that didn't chew, just swallowed. At the edge of the cemetery, an old man raked leaves with the patience of stone. She stopped. "Where can I find the widow?" The man didn't look up. "You've got 2 names," he said finally. "One for the day and one for the dark. You here for which?" "The dark," she said. He pointed without lifting his head. "Then follow the lanterns. But mind the 3rd flame. That's the one that lies." Deborah moved through the woods behind the churchyard. She saw the lanterns, small, distant, fluttering in the cold air. 1, 2. The 3rd flickered, then vanished. She crouched, listened. Nothing. But then, shifting leaves. A bootstep. A breath held too long. She turned, blade ready, only to see a girl. Barely 16, face streaked with soot, eyes sharp. "You walk loud," the girl said. "You hang lanterns for ghosts," Deborah replied. That made the girl grin. "You're Gannett, aren't you? They said you'd look like a boy?" Deborah exhaled. "I'm looking for the widow." "You found her," the girl said. She whistled, a short phrase of notes, and from the darkness stepped 2 more women, both armed, one missing a thumb, the other carrying a rolled chart case. "We're all widow," said the older of the 2. Inside a root cellar lit by beeswax stubs, Deborah sat across from them and laid out the stolen map. Red lines, British movements, a date, February 11th. An ambush at Dobbs Ferry. But more urgent was the name, Rivington. The widow, collectively, had one answer. "He's not a soldier," said the older woman. "He's a mirror. Whatever you are, he'll become it. He speaks rebel in the morning and loyalist at night." The younger woman unfurled a parchment sketch, Rivington's likeness, hawk nose, scar at the chin, unreadable eyes. "He moves freely. Claims allegiance to none. But we know what he wants, a name list." "What list?" Deborah asked. "Names of women, couriers, informants, watchers, those who've passed through the widow's hand." Deborah's throat went dry. "You're on it," the girl said. "He wants you next." That night they rode. The plan was simple: intercept Rivington's convoy before it reached the ferry. But simple never meant easy. Deborah rode at the rear, musket slung, dagger tied to her wrist. Trees passed like ghosts. Owls cried. They moved by moonlight only. Near dawn, they spotted the British wagons, 4 carriages, flanked by dragoons. Rivington was not among them. But the lead cart held something worse: chained prisoners. 3 women. One with a broken arm, one gagged, one unconscious. It was a trap. Not for Deborah, but for Widow. A test. A purge. "Orders?" whispered the older woman. Deborah's mouth went dry. She looked at the prisoners, the guards, the way the convoy moved slow, intentionally slow. She stood in the stirrups. "We take them." And then hell opened. The widow fighters moved like smoke. Gunshots snapped. Horses screamed. Deborah fired once, then twice, reloaded without thinking. She leapt from the saddle, slit a guard's throat, dragged one woman from the cart. Then, a crack. Fire in her side. She fell. Everything turned white. When she woke, she was in the crypt of an old church. Her wound was wrapped in cloth. Snow blew through a broken stained glass window. A figure sat nearby. Not widow. Not friend. Rivington. "I expected a boy," he said. She tried to sit. Couldn't. He held something in his hand. "A book." "You're writing. You keep a journal." He flipped a page. "I do not know what to call myself anymore. I am not Deborah. I am not Shirtliff. I am only breath in borrowed lungs. He looked at her, almost kindly. You are the last widow, and I need you to end it. Act V. The Lantern's Legacy. The war's end was a whisper carried on the breeze, hard won and fragile as a candle flame in a gale. Deborah stepped into a world that had little use for a woman who had lived as a soldier, spy, and shadow. Her body bore the scars of battles no history book would tell, her voice steadied by secrets she'd sworn never to share. She returned home to Middleborough, but it was not the quiet refuge she had remembered. Her neighbors eyed her with suspicion, a woman who walked like a man, who carried herself with unspoken authority, who had survived when so many had not. She opened a small tailor's shop, stitching clothes and mending lives in equal measure. Yet beneath the hum of her needle, a different mission persisted, to pass on the truth in whispers, to keep alive the names and stories the war had tried to erase. Years later, Deborah stood before a crowd in Boston, unmasked at last. Her story spilled forth, the battles, the secrets, the sacrifices. She became the first woman to petition Congress for a soldier's pension. Her legacy ignited a spark, a lantern lit in the darkness, that would guide generations of women into history's fold. The widow's lantern was no longer just a code, or a secret name whispered beneath the trees. It was a beacon, a symbol of courage in the face of silence. A testament that sometimes, the greatest battles are fought not with muskets or swords, but with the fierce, unyielding light of those who dare to walk unseen. Act 6. The light remains. Decades passed, but the flame Deborah ignited never dimmed. In quiet rooms, in the flicker of candlelight, stories of the widow whispered through generations. Her name was lost to time, but her deeds became legend, woven into the fabric of a nation still young, still learning the cost of freedom. In her final years, Deborah sat by the window of her small cottage, the same lantern she once used hanging softly above. Her hands, worn and steady, traced the worn pages of her journal, a testament to a life lived in shadows and light. She knew the war had changed everything, and yet nothing at all. For every voice silenced, 1,000 more rose. And so the lantern stayed lit. A beacon for those who walk in the dark. For those who fight unseen. For the brave souls who carry the flame forward. Long after the drums have fallen silent.